more in person. So I really encourage people, if you have questions, use the chat. Sometimes when I'll be asking you questions, so hopefully we'll all get a chance to talk and learn together. Talking about Go NAPSACC, which is a project to increase children's healthy habits in childcare and therefore influence their healthy habits overall today and for the future. So thank you for joining us today. I am a Go NAPSACC implementation advisor. I've been with Go NAPSACC for about 2 years, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, but I'd love to know more about you. So if people are willing to introduce themselves in their chat, their name, maybe what their role is. Are they a TA? Are they a project manager? What's their interest in being here today? I'd love to know where you're from and what brings you here today. As I said, I've been with Go NAPSACC for 2 years. I support states across the country. I work with about 11 different states right now on using Go NAPSACC, and that looks a little bit different in every state. So we'll talk some about that today. And I support states both in terms of thinking about how they use Go NAPSACC in their state, how they can reach more childcare programs, what would make the most sense for them in their implementation. And then I also help states in terms of the technical pieces. So getting them online, getting childcare providers involved, and so forth. Previously to Go NAPSACC, I worked as on a Smart Start grant in Durham County, overseeing a TA consultant project working around social emotional development. So using the pyramid model to support childcare, children in childcare, as well as educating the teachers and staff on best around social emotional development. So in my previous work, I worked more around the social emotional side. Go NAPSACC works a little bit more on the physical health side. And certainly what we continue to learn is it's the merging of those two, that those two things are really merged much more than we ever realized. The physical health, the social emotional health, and that we want children to have a healthy start overall. That's what makes me excited about working with Go NAPSACC. So with that today, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of Go NAPSACC. I'm going to demonstrate so you'll be able to see how they work, both for a provider as well as for a TA consultant. We're going to do a quick physical activity break. Perhaps you all have been in sessions all day. Want to make sure we stay moving. And then we will talk more about implementation models, talk a little bit about how to include equity in your thinking. And then I'll show you just briefly how evaluation works in Go NAPSACC. So that's what we're here to do today. But I want to start off by knowing kind of where you are coming into this session. So Sarah, if you would be kind enough to go ahead and launch the poll. I just want to know, what do you already know about Go NAPSACC? So if you can go ahead and let us know you're totally on top of things, you're just here to kind of see what's different or new, you haven't done it much, you don't really know a lot, or this is the first you've ever heard about it and you're just here to see what else might be out there. So we'll give people a few more seconds to vote. Got most people voting. I keep you guys involved. Anyone else gonna put in a vote? All right, why don't we stop there? Great, and we can share the results if you want. It looks like most people have heard of Go NAPSACC, but don't, in which case this is the perfect place to be, because hopefully at the end of today, you'll know a lot more. And certainly for those of you who have a little bit more experience, please feel free to share so that others can hear from your experiences along the way. And so I really welcome everyone today. And that is actually really helpful for me to know that it's a name or a program you've heard about, but you don't really know exactly what it is. So we'll get a chance today to learn more about what it is. So with that, we already talked a little bit about my background, that I really treasure being able to bring together the social emotional health and the physical health, and really the goal in the end for all of us as we work in childcare, work with children, is around developing the whole child. So this is the structure that Go NAPSACC uses when we think about a child's development. You might use slightly different words or characterizations, but the reality is that we all want to ensure that children are cared for in environments that help them thrive and build a strong foundation for future success. So while Go NAPSACC is focused more here on this health and physical development side, we realize that children's development in all of these domains, cognitive development, language development, social emotional development, sensory development, that all together, they build a child's overall well-being. And so these domains are certainly well connected. And I always want to start off with thinking about, why is childcare a place to work on these, especially when we think about the health development of a child? Why do you spend your time thinking about that area, that domain, when it comes to childcare? And I'd be thrilled to have people put in a chat a little bit about, why is childcare a place to think about this? I know for me, the phrase that always comes to mind is kind of, childcare is your home away from home. Great, thanks, Sarah. The healthy habits start early, definitely. But they spend the majority of their day in childcare. Exactly, Kamiko, I hope I have that right. And Wendy, guidance from their teacher, exactly. So we know that pre-pandemic, that 60% of children in the US were in childcare, and most of them were there full time, which is 30 hours a week or more. So if we think about that, if you're in childcare that much time, you're eating, most children, breakfast, lunch, and maybe snacks at childcare. So if breakfast and lunch is happening at childcare 5 days a week, that's already 10 meals a week out of total 21 meals. So we know they're getting at least half their nutrition at childcare. If we think about a normal day and playing outside and so forth, by the time a child comes home from childcare and it's 6 o'clock at night, and in the winter it's dark out, they're a lot less likely to spend time being physically active. So their time being physically active is happening at childcare. And then, as Wendy mentioned, it's a place for getting guidance from their teachers. So childcare providers have a really strong influence on children at a very young age, in terms of being a role model, probably the next important role model after their immediate family. And they're also a connector to families. Lots of times families reach out to their childcare providers for information and guidance. So you're really creating the base for the future. And then certainly, as Ms. Ziegler mentioned, early intervention. So certainly also, as we think about development, childcare is an important place that we can catch anything that might not be developing in the way that we normally or typically children develop. So for all those reasons, Go NAPSACC, while we are actually in our background an obesity prevention program, we are an obesity prevention program that works in childcare, because childcare plays such an important role in a child's long-term development and healthy habits. So just to talk about this a teeny bit more, here's a teacher sitting down for a meal with a group of children. And so we certainly hope that they're eating nutritious food, and that's adding to children's physical health. But we also know other areas of development are being impacted at this mealtime as well. And so if anyone has thoughts on how the other areas of development are being impacted, feel free to put those in the chat. But we really see mealtime as not something that just happens to happen, but it's about building the strengths of this whole child. So one of the things I know happens at meal times is, fine motor skills are being developed. Socializing, exactly. Thanks, Kylie. So social emotional development, having conversation, learning how to work with others, talking about where the food comes from. So first of all, just language development at all is happening at mealtime. If there's conversation, that's language development. And then if we're talking specifically about where food comes from, well, that's cognitive development, as well as helping to set that base for health. Manners, that's all part of our social emotional development. Building relationships, part of our social emotional development. Great. So we've already mentioned cognitive development as we're having conversations. We mentioned language development, social emotional, and Elizabeth just mentioned the last, which is sensory development, right? We're tasting new foods, different textures. Hopefully we're having conversations about those things. If I have conversations about different textures and foods and smells, that's adding both to my cognitive development as well as my social emotional development. I'm realizing that I might have one experience, someone else has a different experience. So here we are having one meal, and at that one meal, a child is developing all areas of their social emotion, of their whole child development. Same is true as we think about physical development, children interacting, playing games with each other, being active, right? That's when they start learning problem solving and so forth. So we know that by focusing on health and nutrition and so forth, we're also developing the whole child at the same time. So that's the base of Go NAPSACC. is wanting to help develop that whole child. Go NAPSACC purpose is to support environments to childcare to support improvements to childcare environments that foster healthy eating, physical activity, and overall development in children. We're going to talk about this right at the bottom in more depth, because that's really the base of Go NAPSACC, is these best practices surrounded by this improvement process. So a few things to know about Go NAPSACC is Go NAPSACC started in 2002 here in North Carolina. We currently work with over 20 states, but it did start here in North Carolina. It's as a self-assessment tool. So actually NAPSACC stands for Nutrition and Physical Activity Self-Assessment in Childcare. That is obviously a very long name that doesn't mean a whole lot at this point. But that is what NAPSACC started off with, is doing these self-assessments. And that was developed by researchers, public health professionals, and childcare professionals, because we want to bring together the research side experts along with the implementation experts, along with the reality of what really happens in a childcare classroom. So all together, they did that. The work started with childcare health consultants here in North Carolina and has continued to move across the country. Go NAPSACC has been evaluated through many rigorous evaluations, and it's been shown repeatedly that this program is effective in helping childcare providers make healthy changes in improving children's health behaviors, and when important, also improving their weight. It's become trusted and widely used across the US, and it's been the basis of other programs such as Let's Move Childcare. In 2014, the tool moved from paper NAPSACC, which some of you maybe have seen in the past, to what is now an online platform that's called Go NAPSACC. It's an easy to use, interactive online tools for childcare providers that support the adoption of nutrition and physical activity best practices, and that's what I'm going to show you today. Lastly, it's always important to know that if your state has contracted with Go NAPSACC, and I assume most of you are from North Carolina, but if you're from other states, you can look online at our map, and I can give that link to you later to see if you're a Go NAPSACC state. But if you are, then you have free and unlimited use of Go NAPSACC in your state, which means as many TA consultants as want can get engaged, and as many childcare programs as are interested are getting engaged. So it's unlimited use. So with that, the core of Go NAPSACC are our best practices. So those best practices have been developed through rigorous process that uses the latest scientific research and the most recent guidelines and recommendations in their field. They represent our best available knowledge about how childcare providers can support the development of healthy behaviors in children. And by having these best practices at the heart of the program, it ensures that childcare programs are always moving in the right direction. So no matter what are the best practices they work on, they are moving in the right way. So let me show you the 7 modules of Go NAPSACC, which are all identified by their own specific color or shade and icons. So we start with child nutrition, breastfeeding and infant feeding, farm to EC, oral health. So those are kind of our nutrition side of our sphere. And then from there, we move into infant and child physical activity, outdoor play and learning, and screen time, which is more our physical activity side of the sphere. Go NAPSACC's best practices, just so you know, exceed the existing standards, whether that be NAEYC standards, CACFP, caring for our children, our state regulations in any state. So if a childcare provider is able to meet these standards, they've automatically met those other standards. So truly, this is a gold standard to work towards, and we certainly want providers to work on that one small step at a time. And as we've said before, we just want to remind them that all steps are in the right direction. So let me give you some examples of what those best practices might look like. So within each of those 7 modules, the best practices are broken down into groups, and they're kind of 4 groups. So the first is that which is provided to children. So we call them the 4 Ps. So that's what's provided to children. In child nutrition starts off with the food and beverages provided to them, such as fruit, not juice, is offered 2 times per day or more, is one of the best practices. Next, what's also provided to them is the environment in which they have meals and snacks. So in this case, that's feeding environment. So that's In that feeding environment, television and videos are never on during meals and snack times. The next area is on what the practices are. When I think of the practices, I think of the practices of the adults, whether that be a family home provider, a teacher, the cook in the program. Those are the practices they put in place. So here in child nutrition includes feeding practices. So for example, teachers always praise children for trying new or less preferred foods. And then menus and varieties, it includes that weekly menus always includes a variety of healthy foods. So we start with what's provided to children, the practices of the adults. Next, we have education and professional development, and that's in each of our modules. So that's the education of children, in this case around child nutrition, as someone mentioned before, where food comes from, all those kinds of things. It's also the education and the partnership, the engagement with families, and then also as needed, the professional development of the staff in the program. And then in each module, we end with policy because we want to make sure that the changes we make in a child care program become permanent. So we want to make sure they're included in the policies, whether that is actual policy book, our teacher manuals, our orientation and hiring manuals, our family handbook. We want those to be things that any person who's in that program knows is an expectation of that program. So that's some examples of the best practices that fall into child nutrition. In physical activity, just for one more example, again, we start off what's provided to children. So in physical activity, that's the time provided to be active. So here we go. Preschool children are provided 120 minutes or more for indoor and outdoor physical activity each day. Again, there's the environment, the indoor play environment. And physical activity in Go NAPSACC does focus more on indoors because we do have a separate module specifically about outdoors. However, this, as you saw, for time provided, it's a combination of indoor and outdoor. But when we go back to indoor play environment, there's a large variety of portable play equipment is available and in good condition for children to use indoors. And then again, practices is the next thing. So teachers incorporate physical activity into classroom routines, transitions, and planned activities so that we get physical whenever we can. And circle time, we get up and do something physical. When children are waiting for a meal to be ready, that's a great opportunity to be physical, do something physical as well. And then we move on to educational development, again, of children, families, and the staff. And then lastly, policy. So that's how the best practices work in each of those 7 levels. And, you know, if it was easy as all of us being educated on those best practices and therefore we could do it, we'd be done. But we know that change takes a lot more work than that. So just like it takes us a lot of effort to make changes in our own personal habits, it makes lots of effort for a childcare program to do that. And certainly most of you have that experience in the field and are aware of all the support and guidance that's needed. Childcare providers, especially over the past year or so, have had so much on their plate. We want to create a structure that helps them move through this process. So step 1 is to take a self-assessment, and I'll show you that in a minute, but basically a child care program would pick one of these 7 modules and assess where they are currently. So they'd be asked questions about all those best practices, and they would say, this is where my child care program is currently. And Go NAPSACC is a facility level intervention, so you are looking at the full child care program. Once they take that self-assessment and they view their results, they're able to move forward and start making a plan. And I'll show you in Go NAPSACC the action plans. There's already a pre-prepared start to an action plan for each of those best practices. From there, they take action. They start getting together the important people to make change, thinking about how that might work in their program. If they need to learn, I'll show you Go NAPSACC has a tips and material library, and we just added this year online trainings in all of the various modules and sections. So I can show you those. And obviously you all as TA consultants might have connections to other trainings, or you yourself might do other trainings. So as they learn more, they finish that action plan, they've made their change in their program, they come to step 5, keep it up. At step 5, that's when we talk, if they haven't already, about those policy things and how to make the change permanent. It's where we celebrate the changes they did. Everyone deserves praise and just to feel good about the work they've done. And then that last step of that step 5 is to retake that same self-assessment. So they started here in step 1, taking a child nutrition self-assessment. we're going to ask them to go through the process and take it again. And that's for two reasons. One, to help them see all the changes they've made. And then the reality is on the other side, that is for evaluators to see and funders to see. That's how they get to see all of the influence that you are all having and the healthy changes that are happening in your community. Any questions there before we move on? I'm going to get ready to do a demonstration so you can see what it looks like in action. This really is an opportunity. I'll take a second. If anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. And then confirm if this is a good size. I can make this bigger if that's helpful.
It looks good to me.
Okay, so if people have questions, go ahead and add them in, but we will get started with a little bit showing you around Go NAPSACC. So this is the website. I've already logged in. We have a demo website, which is great for TA consultants who are new to the program. You get to play around and pretend like you're a provider, so you get to have the experience they do. And so that's what I'm showing you today is a demo provider account. So you'll just get to see and play around with what it is. So the first thing to notice is when you log in, and I did obviously log into this already, there's a navigation bar on the left, and they can see all of the steps of the process. And then here they get to see kind of where are they at this moment, their snapshot of where they are. So here are the 7 modules that we discussed. And in this case, I can see off the bat that Nikki Adams up here, this is her account. Her childcare program was called Nikki Stars, has taken 2 self-assessments already. In June of 2020, she took a child nutrition self-assessment and she scored a 65, putting her in this middle area of she's making progress. She's getting along the way. Here in infant and child physical activity in 21, she took an infant and child physical activity self-assessment and scored a 68. That was at the very kind of border between room and improvement and making progress. And that might make her think, I want to work more on that. You know what? I'm already doing good work in child nutrition. Keep on going there to her. And then certainly some of our implementation models include very specific directions where you must go through a certain module at a time. So that really depends on your project. But she gets to see overall where she is. And here we can see all of these icons are still at the very beginning because she's never taken a self-assessment in any of those, and that's fine. As we move down, you can see this file folder system where you can look at any of the modules and a childcare provider can see very quickly where they are. So here we are, as I just said before, in child nutrition, she already took 1 self-assessment. We saw that on top, and actually here I can see says in progress, and then finish self-assessment, that she's already started a second one. So I'm not sure why, maybe she's at the end of those 5 steps, whatever, but she started a second self-assessment. And I'll show you that in a minute so that I can show you what a self-assessment looks like. Well, if we come here to breastfeeding and infant feeding, we can see she never started a self-assessment. That matches what we saw above, and she could always start a self-assessment. So easy to move along, and you can watch a how-to video, and there's also, you can download a how-to guide. So we try to help providers as much as possible move through the process. If she was now to continue working on her child nutrition self-assessment, she could get to it 2 ways. She could stay here on this My NAPSACC page and click on it here, or she could click on the self-assessment page, and again, it takes you to the various self-assessments and you can see where she is. So with that, oh, and I should tell you actually from the self-assessment page, she can print a blank self-assessment. So she could print out her child nutrition self-assessment on paper. So why is that helpful? It could be helpful for a few reasons. The self-assessment, like I said before, is done for the whole childcare program. So when we're talking about teachers' practices, how they talk to children about food, how they talk to children about if they're full or still hungry, whether or not they praise children, a director of a childcare center might have to go observe a few meal times to learn more. So that might be helpful to have a printed self-assessment. A provider might want some time to think about it. And then sometimes we find that providers who aren't as tech savvy just like having it on paper and kind of reading through the questions first. What's nice about the self-assessment here is if you've ever seen a paper self-assessment of Go NAPSACC before, it has all of the questions. But when a child care provider registers for an account, they answer questions such as what age are the children are in their program? Do they provide the meals or do children bring the meals from home? Things like that. And all of those answers tailor the self-assessment. So when a child care provider takes the self-assessment online, they're only asked the questions that apply to them. So that can be really helpful. We want to make sure that they are filling out this tailored self-assessment so they get to give input on where they actually can make a difference. So let me show you a little bit about how the self-assessment works. In this case, it's going to start me in the middle of a self-assessment, which I think is easier just for time. If you were pushing that start self-assessment button, it would just go straight to the questions. But for me, because I'm finishing a self-assessment, it actually is going to tell me what questions I have left. So here gives you an example of what the questions look like. Remember that first best practice I showed you? It was about how often children are offered juice rather than offered fruit rather than juice. And here's that question. How often does your program offer fruit, not including juice? There's then 4 answers. Most of the questions have 4 answers. So it goes from 3 times per week or less to 2 times per day or more. She clicked on 2 times per day or more. That is the best practice. So the last answer, just for you to all know, is always the best practice. Child care provider would continue to go through answering questions. Notice where the questions are underlined. If you hover on those, you can see the definition as Go NAPSACC used it. So in this example, how often does your program offer fried potatoes? So here we get a little bit of a definition. Fried or pre-potatoes include French fries, tater tots, hash browns that are pre-fried, sold frozen, and prepared in the oven. So that's important for someone to think about because they might think, well, I don't fry it. But if it comes to you already having been fried in the factory, it still has the nutrition of a fried food. Anywhere where the you can see it underlined, the provider or you can check to learn more. So we continue to move through. Every time the provider hits the continue button, it's going to save the answers that they've completed so far. So we know childcare providers are busy. We know they get interrupted, but to know that every time they hit that continue button, it's going to save it. So here's our first question on beverages provided. When and where is drinking water available? Only when the children ask. Only when children ask and during water breaks. Only indoors when it's always visible and freely available. Indoors, outdoors, where it's always visible and freely available. So we want children to always have access to water, and so that's our best practice. So maybe we haven't gotten there yet. Right now we have water breaks, but we don't always have water available. So the child care provider continues to move through, answer all the questions. I always like to point out questions about the environment that include our teachers eating unhealthy foods in front of children, so forth. Our teachers serving as role models. Are the materials in our program role modeling what healthy food looks like? Does our dramatic play have fruits and vegetables, or does it only have ice cream and hot dogs, right? Are we letting children know that healthy foods are always an option? We continue to move through. I like to point out this question because it's probably the most complicated in all of Go NAPSACC. How often do you use an authoritative feeding style? And I think people see that word authoritative and their brains go automatically to authoritarian, which is very different, right? Authoritative means there's a balance between encouraging children to eat healthy foods and allowing children to make their own food choices. So we want to be encouraging, but we also want to respect the children's wishes. And that, as much as that's about setting up good habits for healthy eating, that to me goes back to that social emotional development and making sure we're respecting children and their bodies and the choices they make. So no, we pretty much tell children they have to eat their meals. So we're not really giving them the choice. We're telling them they need to finish. So we're not there yet. We continue to move through. I continue to hit continue as I answer my questions. I want to show you at the end, here's the information about our education And the last question in each module is about written policy. And so it is, does your program have a written policy, in this case, on child nutrition? If my answer is no, then I'm done. If my answer is yes, then I have a drop-down menu and I can talk specifically about what is in my policy section. And so that's how each best practice self-assessment ends. And in a few cases, there are a few other places where there is a menu like that. So I continue to move through. If I answered all of these questions, the final step I need to do is hit this button that says finish and view results. So I'm not going to do that right now since this self-assessment is in progress, but that would be my next step. Once I've taken the self-assessment, I can view my results. So remember, I showed you that this child care provider had already done before a child nutrition self-assessment. So we're going to see the results from that one. So what comes up is the photo that goes with each of those sections we just discussed. So I can see my results in foods provided, beverages provided, the feeding environment, each one separately. So let's look at foods provided. In this case, you get to see first in the green what best practices your program has already met. In this case, my children are given sweet or salty snacks outside of meals and snack times less than 1 time per week or never. I can also see the best practices that we haven't met yet. And in this case, the child care provider has some work they could do on their menu, and that's okay. And they get to see what their response is right with the best practice right there. So Go NAPSACC's not hiding anything. You get to see exactly where you are and where you want to go. So the child care provider can then move back and see other results in other sections. Maybe I want to know about feeding environment. Here I've got television videos are never on during meals or snacks. That's the best practice I've already met. And here's the best practices I can work on. The other option that I personally find somewhat helpful is that I can print my results. So if I click here, automatically it pops up and I don't have to print it if I don't want. I could just save the document and I could see all of the best practices in that module at once. So different way of coming about that same material. What do I do next after I look at my results? Hopefully I would talk to my consultant and make a plan, but the next thing we do is start action plans. So I would select goals I want to work on, and I'm going to go through this pretty quick just because I want you all to see more of what's here. So I could decide I want to work on that fruit goal, and now I can come back down here and I can start an action plan on that goal. So here I go. I chose that as what I want to work on, and here I can start my action plan. So that's the next neat thing about Go NAPSACC is for each best practice, there's already a started action plan. Now, we don't want the provider ideally to do this as it is because everyone's program is different. And the reality is that the way change happens is by us being invested in the change. So we want them to really think about the action plan and maybe work with a TA consultant to really customize it for them. So they can customize it by writing more with the different steps. They could over here write some information about when they're going to meet that goal or who they need to reach out to. They can realize that for whatever reason, the goals should be in a different order for them. They can move them around. So lots of options to customize the action plan and make it personal to them and really think through, what do I need to do in my childcare program to bring this to reality? They can also add more steps if they need to and so forth. Go NAPSACC gives a suggestion date for each action plan based upon about how long we think it might take to implement. So in this case, we were suggesting to spend 2 months working on this fruit goal because it's going to take some time to figure out the finances of buying more fruit, storage, keeping fruit fresh or using canned fruit, what that's going to mean to my kitchen staff. So there's things to think about, right? So we give you about 2 months. But if you realize, you know what, there's just more going on right now, I can't do that in 2 months, you can always change the date and give yourself more time. The last step is to save that action plan. So it's here in the system for you to go back to. A child care provider can edit it again if they realize they need to do other different things. They can click off steps as they finish them. And then once they finish that whole action plan, they need to mark that I reached this goal. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. So they want to make sure they get credit for the success that they made. And so they hit that button that I reached that goal. I had mentioned to you before the tips and material library. So if I was working specifically on this goal of fruit is offered 2 times per day or more, down here, I could be taken to the tips and material library that's specifically about that topic. So I'm going to click on that. And there I go. I go straight into the tips and material library around food and so forth. So I have lots of recipes to look at and things to think about as I think about changing my menu, working with my vendor if I have an outside vendor, thinking more about fruits and vegetables, which we've been just talking about. And any of these tips and materials have been vetted by Go NAPSACC and saved here in our website. So you can't keep on clicking and going down a trail to perhaps resources that you're not confident about. So just like you can be confident of our best practices, you can be confident of our tips and materials. So if I click on that, it just saves right to my, opens right in my desktop, and I can look through the materials and see what's here if that's helpful for me. As a TA, you could download this and save it, or as a child care provider, you can download it and share it with other staff members. You can mark something as a favorite so it's easy to find later and so forth. So here around foods provided, we've got recipes and guidance, classroom activities, and then family engagement materials. You can also see that there is a space here where you can use the search button. And so you can go ahead and do a search if there are specific things I want to know about, like fruit. And here's all the different things about fruit. So lots of great things. If I want to see the tips and material library as a whole, when I click over here on the side, I have each of the 7 modules. I can click down and I can choose a topic. So as you can see here, we were just looking at foods provided. I could skip to feeding practices. And here I have teacher and staff resources and family engagement. The other thing I want to show you is that while we have had materials ongoingly in Spanish, this is the first time we have just recently added a separate section specifically of all the Spanish resources for each module. So I can click on that and find all materials that are written in Spanish. We have these same materials in the regular library so that English speakers can find them to share with Spanish speakers. There, the title is in English. Here in this Spanish section, the title is in Spanish so that providers can easily find it themselves. Last part of the provider website that I want to show you is this trainings page. So our trainings page is brand new this year. We are very excited about it. And basically all of those sections of Go NAPSACC, so within child nutrition, foods provided, beverages provided, teacher practices, so forth, each one has its own training. They're all about a half an hour long. They're built in the website. Here in North Carolina, they are all receive DCDE credit. So providers receive a certificate and they get credit for the training. And also TAs could use them as part of a larger training as they wanted. I'm not sure about how much time we have to go through those, so I just want to show you very quickly what happens as you take a training. Once you start a training, it automatically pulls up a video. And I'm having a hard time with the sound now. Not sure why that is. Anyhow, so the training pulls straight up. People are able to take the training in the website. There is a short quiz they take afterwards, and then they fill out an evaluation, and their certificate is built straight into the website. So they're able to download their certificate and move on. The way it's set up is your whole staff could take the training together in a staff meeting if it was a child care program, or a few teachers could take it together, or one teacher at a time could take it. And multiple people can take it. So if different classrooms all want to take the same training but need to do it on their own time schedule, that's possible as well. Last things to know about the website is there is a My Account page so that the provider can see exactly how they answer those original registration questions. And then there's also a help page where we do offer East Coast time business hours help, as well as an email address you can always email with questions. So that is the childcare provider side of things. I'm going to show you quickly the TA consultant side of things. And again, take a deep breath on my side and ask people if they have any questions to put them in the chat. So I have now logged into the demo site as a TA provider. And the first thing I see is my programs. So I am currently connected to 2 programs who serve a total of 52 children. And then I have other programs that I've tried to connect with, and I'm waiting for them to respond to my request. This is very similar to like a social media request. The TA consultant would put out an invite, and the provider would accept that request, which would help them start their account. Remember, I told you before, we were looking at Nikki Starr's. That's one of the childcare programs that my provider's connected with. And so here I can see very quickly as her TA that she got on Go NAPSACC last September. She took an infant and child physical activity self-assessment. That's the most recent self-assessment she's taken. And look, just now we made an action plan in child nutrition 5/4/21. And if I see more about her account, I click on her name and I get to see all of the information that you and I just were looking at from the provider account. So I can see the results to her self-assessments. I can see her action plans. I can see exactly what she's doing in Go NAPSACC. I can't change things. We want Nikki to be in control of her account, but I can see them and help her work on them. I won't show you in as much depth, but this connections page is where you invite new programs. So if a childcare program is new to Go NAPSACC, this is where you would send them an invite so that they could create their account. Consultant resources is new in the past year, and it goes through each step of the Go NAPSACC process, our steps 1 through 5, as well as previous to that, the enrollment and orientation, and talks about why it's important, what the activities are, gives you suggestions on how to deal with common issues, and then lastly gives you support documents. So for example, here we're talking about orientation. We have a slideshow that you can pull down and use with providers. You don't have to create it from scratch. That will help you get them started on Go NAPSACC. There's a timeline for what a normal Go NAPSACC cycle looks like, starting off with orienting them, having them take their self-assessment, write their action plans, all the things we've talked about. We think it takes about 6 months usually to go through the Go NAPSACC process. And then information overall about how to use Go NAPSACC. So we hope this is helpful to consultants. There's tips here that are special for consultants. There's success stories, but there's a lot of information here about how to, as a consultant, how to help people along. And some of this is more about how to just be a good consultant, how to partner with programs, help them in the process. And then some of it really is specific to Go NAPSACC, what you might want to ask at different points of the process, how you might help people troubleshoot technical problems, all of that type of thing. So want to make sure people saw the consultant resources and all of the new things that it offers. It includes things like promotional flyers, possible email to send out. We just finished the social media post, promotional social media posts. So those will be going up on the soon. So lots of tools to help you in your implementation. After that, TA consultants have access to the whole tips and material library, like providers do. And then there's a report section. And I'm not really going to spend much time about that, but that's where you can pull down all of the data about what providers are doing in Go NAPSACC and so forth. Within the consultant account, that's all of the data about the programs that you as a TA consultant are connected with. If you are someone who's overseeing larger implementation, then you'd have what's called a state partner account, and then you can get the data on everything that's happening in your state. And then again, a TA consultant has a My Accounts page, and then a help page. So that is what the website looks like. We are working on getting the trainings added to the TA account. They're not there right now, but right now TAs can see those, as I said before, in the demo account. So that shows you a little bit about what a TA account looks like. I do want to show you back to where we were looking at Nikki Starr's, that you can see what self-assessments she's taken, but you can also see the results of her self-assessment. So you really are able to see all of the work that she does. You can also see the action plan she's written. So I can come here, I can view her action plan. Again, I can't change it, but I can see what she's working on, and that way I can help provide her more guidance as she goes through. So that shows you a lot about the Go NAPSACC process for both providers and TAs. We're going to talk more about implementation in a second. I'm going to switch back to my slideshow, and if for any reason you can't see the slides, if someone could let me know, I'd appreciate it. So just to kind of put the whole process together, there's the child care provider experience. So what's that like for them? They start by enrolling, registering for an account. They would then pick a module and take a self-assessment. We would never recommend a provider work in more than 2 modules at a time. This isn't a do everything at once, quick. This is slowly make change that you can really sustain. So we would ask them to take 1 to 2 modules at the most at a time and take their self-assessment. It's important to get them to honestly reflect on where they are as a program. People are used to being assessed or being visited by licensing, and they get worried. We do not want them to just answer the questions that they think are right. We want them to answer honestly so that they know where they are now and where they want to go tomorrow. They then start to make a plan. They view their results. They select goals. They write action plans. They take action. They get other people involved. They start implementing. They learn more. They use the tips and material libraries. They take trainings. And then when they're done, they work on keeping it up. They talk about sustainability. They look at their policies and manuals, and they retake the self-assessment. So what does that mean for you as a TA consultant? What's your experience like? You start first, once you've recruited programs, you send them an invite or a connection request. You provide them guidance on the module selection, whether that is up to the childcare provider or whether or not because of the implementation you're doing, they need to start with a specific module. I talked to someone earlier today who's working very specifically on farm to ECE. You encourage them to self-reflect. You discuss the results with them. We always encourage you to meet face-to-face or on Zoom or some sort of way where you can really help them write their first action plan, both to help them technically maneuver the website and also to really think through what are the steps they need to put in place to make change happen. You provide encouragement and resources for implementation, whether that be from Go NAPSACC's tips and materials or from other resources you have. You help them learn more, sharing tips and materials, providing training, connecting them to community resources, and then again, you help them have a conversation about how to make this sustainable, reviewing their materials, and help them take that last self-assessment. So that's kind of the background of Go NAPSACC. We're going to do a quick physical activity break. And I didn't really think this through, that I would be the only one that I could see. So if anyone else, Sarah, anyone else out there is willing to stand up and show your stuff, we are going to do a quick physical activity break. So I'm going to trust that people out there in the real world are doing this with me and not just laughing at me as we do this together. So this is a 1-minute physical activity break. So here we go. I've been sitting at a desk all day. Sarah.
So this energizer is called Crazy Eights. It's a high energy energizer that gets the whole body moving, so your arms and your legs and everything. So you first start with your right hand over your head and you count up to 8, shaking it, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You do the same with your left hand and your right and your left leg. Next round, you count up to 4, going 1, 2, 3, 4. Same with your other arms and your legs. Then you go to 2, and then 1, and then you clap at the very end. Are you guys ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Okay, we're going to do it together again now.
High
Here we
energy
go.
energizer that gets the whole
Now let's
body
start
moving,
again.
so your arms and your legs and everything. So you first start with your right hand over your head and you count up to 8, shaking it, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You do the same with your left hand and your right and your left leg. Next round, you count up to 4, going 1, 2, 3, 4. Same with your other arms and your legs. Then you go to 2, and then 1, and then you clap at the very end. Are you guys
Okay,
ready?
everyone, we can do this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1.
So I hope you got up for a second, and if nothing else, you got to be amused by watching me do that. So I'm going to take a deep breath, so we can all take a few deep breaths together. Ready? In, exhale. 2 more. So we all want to keep our bodies healthy, our minds active, get some energy and some oxygen to our bodies. So with that, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about implementation models. So I've shown you how the tools of Go NAPSACC work, and I've mentioned a little bit that it works differently in every place. And that is both kind of the gift of Go NAPSACC and sometimes the complexity of Go NAPSACC. People call me and they want to know, what do I do next? And it really depends on your state and your implementation, and that's going to be different. But I can give you some examples of what it might look like, and then we can certainly connect you to people who are doing Go NAPSACC around the country. So without a doubt, most of Go NAPSACC is happening within some sort of technical assistance network. So I know here in North Carolina, and I'm assuming most of you are from North Carolina, we have childcare health consultants using Go NAPSACC, whether those be at a local partnership or in health departments. We have TA consultants in childcare resource and referrals who are using Go NAPSACC. We have TA consultants in local partnerships. We have community health educators in health departments using Go NAPSACC, and we have staff at cooperative extension using Go NAPSACC. So lots of different opportunities, and they're all doing some form of TA support to childcare providers. And so they may have funding that has them connecting with X number of childcare programs a year. And that funding could be through Smart Start, that funding could be through childcare block grants. We're hoping that some stimulus money will support healthy childcare in this way, but there's lots of different opportunities to provide TA support to Go NAPSACC. So what might that look like? It might be rolling TA. That means that you might be working in a local health department and you are committed to work with 10 childcare programs a year. And as programs get interested, you get them engaged and you just slowly work with them over time. We call that rolling TA. And so as they are ready, they move through the process. And they're each kind of on their own cycle and doing their whole own thing. And you just slowly continue to register and work with more programs. You could have programs that need different levels of support. So maybe you're allowed to provide intense support, time-wise, funding-wise, with 5 programs at a time. And so with those 5 programs, you meet with them regularly, you offer them ongoing support, you do training for them and so forth. Other programs who are interested, you might help them get an account and you're there if they have questions, but your support isn't as intense. And that might be based upon funding and time, or that might be based upon the childcare program's needs, which is even greater, right? One program might be, once they've gone through the process once, they're really in a rhythm and they're able to keep on going. Other programs, there are other barriers in their way. Maybe they're not as comfortable technically. Maybe they're just struggle with making change and it's really hard for them to get momentum and so they need your help more. So TA can be offered with varying intensity, shown here with a dark line for people who need more help, or the lighter line for those who just need a light touch. And so in some cases, TAs can modulate their intervention based upon the provider's needs. But they're all, as we said before, moving in the right direction. Some programs do what's called cohort. So I'm working with a new agency in Indiana where they have, for all of their TA, they have what they call a cohort model. So in their case, childcare programs that want to be involved in quality improvement pick the area that they want to. So it could be around business practices. It could be around social emotional development. It could be around using class to improve teacher-child interactions. It could be around health, child nutrition, physical activity. So what they're going to do is put together 10 programs that all want to work around health and have them work as a cohort. So they meet once a month as providers together with their TA just to touch base, learn from each other. They'll all take a self-assessment at the same time. Then they'll all start working on an action plan. And as a cohort together, they'll go through this process and support each other. There they go. They're all making progress together. They might be working on slightly different action plans, but they're all connected to work as a team and support each other along the way. Next comes any sort of group TA, a learning collaborative. In North Carolina, there's been lots of learning collaboratives, whether that be through Shape NC, the current FIG grant around Farm to ECE, the CEF's Farm to EC learning collaboratives. So those are models where programs come together, and as much as they make change and use Go NAPSACC to help them with the self-assessments and so forth, it's also a chance for them to learn together. So they come together, maybe they, I'm involved in a learning collaborative in some other states right now, where first they have an orientation and they learn about the learning collaborative and Go NAPSACC as a whole. They then are working on one module at a time. So they're going to start with physical activity. They take their physical activity self-assessment. They get physical activity training. Then they work on action plans, and then they retake their physical activity self-assessment. 2 months later, they're doing the same thing with child nutrition, 2 months later with breastfeeding and infant feeding, and then 2 months later with screen time. So it's a 1-year project, about 9 months, the school year. It's fairly intense because as they are working on those action plans in physical activity, they're also starting child nutrition. Now they're working on both of those, and then they're going to start adding breastfeeding. However, at the same time, they've got this incredible support of coming together with other providers and getting training along the way. So that's kind of how a learning collaborative might work. And there, they get to travel as a group, work together. So in that type of implementation, right, they're all going to work on the same self-assessments at the same time. The ones that I showed you earlier, where it's more of varying intensity or rolling TA, it might make it easier for providers to choose self-assessment or whatever area they want to focus on. But that's how the implementation works as we think about using TA networks to support Go NAPSACC. Another way in other states, not here in North Carolina yet, but that Go NAPSACC is being used is within QRIS. So the best practices of Go NAPSACC align closely with the 47 obesity prevention standards, if people are familiar with those, excuse me. And so many states have seen Go NAPSACC as a way to incorporate and elevate the standards for all childcare providers. So in those cases, QRIS has been built into their, Go NAPSACC has been built into their QRIS system. 2 states that come to mind to me are Wisconsin has done this, and Arkansas is in the process of adding it to their higher levels QRIS. So Arkansas previously had level 1, 2, and 3. They're now adding higher levels of their QRIS, 4, 5, and 6. and those will have Go NAPSACC as one of the possible requirements. People do that differently in different states. In some states, they're looking for self-assessment results that come at a certain level. In other states, they are simply looking for providers to make progress. So for example, in Arkansas, in level 4, you must take a self-assessment in one module. In level 5, you must implement action plan steps. So it's slowly moving you through the Go NAPSACC, but it's not saying you have to qualify at a certain score or anything like that. It's really saying you are engaged in this process of improving your program around issues of health. So again, the improvement process, they take the self-assessment, they write the action plans, and that counts kind of as points on their QRIS, depending on how their QRIS works in their states. Our goal, often by adding things to QRIS, is eventually they'll become part of licensing, that these things will just be the standard of what we consider high quality childcare. Which brings us to another way in which we often try to reach high quality childcare, and that's through statewide recognition and intervention programs. So any sort of recognition program that recognizes high quality childcare in the area of health. So in North Carolina, there are 2 that come to mind. One is the breastfeeding friendly designation, which is currently on hiatus, but that is one option. And the other is REACH, which is recognizing ECE's advancing children's healthy habits. That program was last year using farm to EC and child nutrition, and hopefully over the next year will be built out. We are working with IHOPE and the Department of Health and Human Services to continue building out REACH to incorporate the other self-assessments, the other modules. So that would include physical activity, outdoor play and learning, oral health, and screen time. So all of them but breastfeeding, since breastfeeding already has its own recognition program. What that's going to look like here in North Carolina involves you would take a self-assessment, create your improvement process. If you reach a certain score, you would be recognized in that module. So the way we have it set up right now is once you have met a certain benchmark in one module, you would be qualified as a bronze on REACH. Once you've gotten there in 2 modules, you'd be a silver, and then, sorry, that's not true. One module is bronze, 2 modules are silver. I'm not getting it right now. I think that's right. And then 4 to 5 modules would make you a gold REACH program. So as I said, that program is still in development. And if people are interested in being involved in the next round of piloting that program, probably in early 2022, I would love to hear from you, because we are looking for more TAs. The original pilot was done during COVID times. We didn't engage programs who hadn't been involved in this healthy childcare work before, because we thought that was too much of programs who had never been engaged. So we really want in this next level to get programs to go through the pilot, give us feedback if they are new to the area of healthy childcare. So if you want to know more about REACH, I will actually put in the chat the email address where you can email to get more information, or if you're interested in being a TA, we'd love to have you get involved. Throughout the country, there are lots of recognition programs around healthy childcare. They are all slightly different, but they are all a way of recognizing childcare providers for the hard work they do, and for letting, hopefully, families know that this is important as well. To let families know that this is a childcare program who has chosen to focus on this area, and for families to learn about what maybe healthy childcare and therefore raising healthy children looks like. So lots of different ways of involving Go NAPSACC in your work. Anyone have any questions before we just talk briefly about equity and then start rounding out our session together? As a public oops, sorry. As a public health program, we are always thinking about equity and how to those who are most in need and reaching everyone universally as well. I think the reality is this past year has made us all talk more publicly about equity, and I think that's really important. So as we think about NAPSACC, I'd love to hear from people if they're willing to take a minute to unmute themselves or put in the chat as they think about implementing Go NAPSACC. Are there any equity concerns or opportunities that you see? We'll give people a minute to think about that. As you think about implementing a program like Go, whether you're currently involved or thinking about it for the future, what concerns or opportunities do you see? Great. So yes, you can get resources no matter where they are in the state, no matter different communities. Go NAPSACC could reach everyone. Thanks, Sarah. So in one sense, because Go NAPSACC online, it can reach everyone. On the other hand, obviously, as we know, technology is not accessible to everyone online. That's also possibly a place where it is also difficult, right? It works both ways. I think one of the things that we've seen in this year of doing everything remotely is that it allows TAs to work with people even if they're not right in their community. That for some people, while obviously not being able to visit directly in childcare programs and not be able to make that relationship face-to-face is a negative. On the other hand, TAs spend so much of their time in the car. It's really nice to be able to spend more time connecting with people online. Cami mentioned that she likes that it has worked with the Latino community. Great. It has definitely needs a team effort. So let me go back to both of those. One, for Cami to know, while the website is not bilingual, we are continuing to work on that. So that is where we have added the Spanish resource section. That is brand new. We are also in the process of translating all of the self-assessments. So the self-assessments will be available in a bilingual format. And we will be having actually a webinar specifically on doing Go NAPSACC with Spanish providers at the end of May. And so I'll give people information about that. Wendy mentioned that it really takes a team effort. So yes, obviously, just like anything, it's more likely to be effective if the whole team is involved. And it's interesting that you mentioned, Wendy, a director, a cook, and a teacher. We often think of those three people as maybe being our leadership team, right? Our champions who are going to help make this possible. The director can certainly oversee and set the goals, but the reality is unless teachers are involved and buy in, just like any change in a childcare program, you're not going to get anywhere. So we really want to think about how do we involve all of the important players to make change happen. There are some changes like changing the menu that might take less people's involvement, while other changes about daily practices, about being more physically active, about teachers being physically active in front of children really takes the buy-in of everyone. So this is a facility level implementation, and so we need everyone to be on board. So hopefully that answers your question. Alicia asked about having low staff. Does that mean low staff like numbers, currently staffing issues? Is that what that means, Alicia? Because I think certainly overall right now, the staffing issues in childcare is a difficulty everywhere. I can give you all information about the May webinar. That'd be great. So Alicia, yes, obviously taking on a new initiative takes effort. And so you have to gear, and is a program ready for this change? And certainly this past year, not all programs have been ready to take on new initiatives. At the other time, we had programs in some parts of the country that while they were closed, it was a time to improve their policies. It was a time teachers can take trainings and so forth. As Patty mentioned, yes, new initiatives take money. No one is doubting that. There are two different ways to think about money when it comes to Go NAPSACC. One is obviously the money to pay for your TA time. That's a much larger funding issue, right? As far as the new initiatives within the childcare program, there are some best practices that cost no money, changing from one of the best practices is about not serving canned fruit in syrup, in heavy syrup. So like if you're serving fruit cocktail, you want it to be in natural fruit juice and not heavy syrup. Making that change doesn't cost any money. Other changes, like changing your outdoor play environment, obviously can cost lots of money. That's actually a tool we're working on at Go NAPSACC right now, is a tool that would help TA consultants help steer programs towards best practices that they can afford, because we don't want money to be the thing that makes you not be able to make change. We also find that sometimes when programs start with smaller changes that are free and they build up some momentum, it's easier to start looking for outside community support, whether that be from the 4-H to help them build a garden or things like that. So we want them to get started that don't feel like barriers and move on. And so with that, there is a range. So lots of thinking about equity. Let me, great, thanks, Patty. So just to build on that, we're in the works, as like I said, is a tool first that will be out first on low and no cost best practices, because we want people to know the things that they could do right away. And then later on, we will be working on a tool for those best practices with higher costs and suggestions of where you can get more resources. But that one's going to be a little farther out of the way. So another way that we're trying to think about equity. When I think about equity and Go NAPSACC, I always want to start with recruitment, because I think it's always easiest to go back to the same programs that we've worked with before, or to those that when you send out a survey, they jump on everything. And on one hand, that's really great because they're really interested. On the other hand, they may already be getting support, or they may already be working in a different initiative and not have the energy for this one. So I always want to start with equity begins in recruitment. How do I think about reaching out to, how do I create those initial relationships so that they'll want to work with me in the future? And that sometimes it might be better, and I know this is an issue with funding, and I'm not going to get into that, but to work with less programs that take more time because they need more support than those programs that are always easy to work with. Sometimes it's the programs that are the farthest behind that the smallest change will make the biggest difference. And so rather than looking for the biggest change, who are those programs that we can start them on a path of change is one way of thinking about equity. So thinking about it, maybe a mix of your caseload of higher and lower needs programs. So here's some other equity things that we've thought about. Nothing fancy, but just doing some brainstorming. One of the nice things to think about Go NAPSACC is that childcare providers are really able to self-determine, that the control is with them. That's part of being equitable, is letting people have their own self-determination. People can choose what best practices they want to work on, where they want to go as a program. That it has tailored for various types of programs. So if you're a family childcare home, Go NAPSACC has support for you. If you're a full day childcare program, it has support for you. We talked a little bit about the Spanish resources, that we can provide technological support to help programs who need that. That there are free and low cost best practices that we talked about, that has built-in free online training. So right there in Go NAPSACC, childcare providers can receive training. That the TA consultant support can be individualized based upon what they need. In some places, I haven't mentioned this, programs use incentives to help think about keeping programs engaged. And I would hope that at some point we get to a point where we think about incentives being different for the needs of different programs. I don't think we've gotten there as a place. We really think about everyone gets the same thing, and maybe at some point we'll be ready to think about that differently. And then lastly, I just wanted to put out there that we do have a Go NAPSACC Nation Advisory Group that started this year, where we bring together providers, childcare providers, TA consultants, and state partners who use Go NAPSACC to continue to give us input and let us know what we need to do to improve. Because as I said before, as public health professionals, our goal is always to provide an equitable project and product for all of our programs. And the best way to do that is by getting input by those people who are directly on the ground and doing that work. So if people have other ideas, they're always welcome to email me. Okay, we are coming to the end. So just so you know a little bit that there is evaluation data built in Go NAPSACC. I really didn't spend time on that today. I find when people are brand new to Go NAPSACC, it's not the time they want to look at Excel spreadsheets and think about that. But just know that you can pull down reports on what programs you have registered, on their answers to all the self-assessments, on their goals that they've chosen, and so forth. Detailed activity kind of shows them through the whole Go NAPSACC picture. And so there are lots of opportunities to pull data. Some people are really like playing with Excel, like looking at it and being able to see, you know what, I'm working with 10 programs and all of them, none of them are scoring very high on this question. Maybe I need to do some more TA on that. So there's lots of that, as well as for any of you who have to submit regularly, SNAP-Ed reports, Smart Start reports, other kinds of reporting. One of the nice things about Go NAPSACC is you don't have to do the separate evaluations. Go NAPSACC has it right there and can provide you. So, and I'm gonna pull, oops, real quick, because I was asked about, I will tell you that Ohio is not currently a Go NAPSACC state. But this is where you can find the Go NAPSACC map and see who's out there. And certainly I would be happy to talk with you later if you are interested in getting involved. Whoops. So reporting, just want you to know that one of the nice things about Go NAPSACC is you automatically see the pre-self-assessment, the second program sees all of your evaluation data is built right into the system. You don't need to be keeping separate data. You could create an evaluation that comes straight from Go NAPSACC. So know that that is here as well for you. So with that, next steps, hopefully I've gotten you interested enough that you might want to learn more. So a few things to know: if you are in a Go NAPSACC state and you aren't already receiving NAPSACC Nation news, you're welcome to email me and let me know you want to be added to our newsletter. I will put my email address in the chat. If you do that, I would need to know what state you're from and your email address. And if you could just let me know you want to be added to our mailing list. You can also put it in the chat. I'm assuming that SmartStart can give me the chat at the end of this. You can always follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Go NAPSACC. If you are a TA consultant and you want to get involved, we offer webinars 6 times a year for TAs. The next one is on May 26th, and that is on serving childcare providers in Spanish. We do consultant training. If you're new to Go NAPSACC and you need to be trained as a consultant, we do that once a month. The next dates here are for May and June, and you can let me know if you're interested in that. And we can get you trained as a Go NAPSACC consultant if you're in one of our states. On our side, we're ready to have you go. Obviously, you might have other issues in terms of finding the time or having it connected to a project, but we'd love to have you get more involved and be trained so you know kind of what you're signing up for. And then your next step after you do that is certainly enrolling childcare providers and getting them started. If you are a local partnership or another agency, as someone mentioned earlier, obviously it costs money to make any new program happen. So you need to really develop your intervention model. You need to think about staffing, funding. We want you to include incentives. We've learned that those are really key. Thinking about your goals for your program as overall, and then starting to think about how you're going to train your staff and outreach to ECE programs. We have states where their implementation is very stringent, and they're training people very systematically, and only certain TAs can get involved at a time. We have other states who are making lots of connections, and there's all different types of TAs involved, and their implementation might be slightly different. So there's lots of opportunities to get involved and for you to think about what's best for your community. So that tells you a lot about getting involved with Go NAPSACC. I have here again some of the same things I said before about my information. I am the implementation advisor for North Carolina, but as I said, I also work with 10 or so other states, and then my coworker works with the rest. So just reach out to me if you have any implementation questions. And I think that is the end of my breath. So with that, I think I turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Aviva. And I wanted to ask really quick if anyone has any questions that we didn't answer during the session, to please pop them in the chat again, or if you want to unmute, feel free and ask them. I do have a special giveaway from one of our sponsors, so I'm going to take over screen sharing.
It's giveaway time, guys. It's giveaway time. Jamal here from Lakeshore. We're about to have some fun. I wish I could be with everybody right now, but guess what? If we were all together, I would be giving away some kind of good